The Silver Fern sculpture project is a creation of a 4.5 metre high stainless steel three-dimensional silver fern that's going to be erected on a historical battle site in Israel from World War One. It represents the battle, but beyond that, the 18,000 soldiers that served in the Holy Land or the Palestine campaign. The particular battle where it'll be erected was called the Battle of Ayun Kara. It was fought on the 14th of November 1917, and it was a turning point possibly in the war. It was a fierce battle that cost the lives of 53 New Zealand soldiers, some 200 wounded, and they were outpositioned, they were outnumbered, they were outgunned, and they were able to be successful on the day. And it's quite important history for New Zealand. It was the very first military battle fought under total New Zealand command. Prior to that, it was largely English command, so we feel like it's worth remembering. My connection to this project is fairly direct. My grandfather was in that battle, and it appears that he was heavily involved and very lucky to survive. And there was not a lot of personal accounts. I knew my grandfather. I was 13 years old when he passed away, and really didn't know much more beyond that, apart from the fact that he was in the Middle East somewhere and had fought, and he brought home a name which was called Sarona, and that was where they camped and licked their wounds basically for about a week after the Battle of Ayun Kara. I'm very fortunate to be a custodian of quite a large amount of material from the First World War that my grandfather either brought home or sent home, including items like his field diary that describes his life there and his journey through the Holy Land as it was then. Very fortunate to have that. It's a pretty detailed account. Plus he sent home probably near around 200 letters. We have 174 letters with us, plus newspapers and quite a bit of other material. So it's wonderful to have this material and to be able to piece it together and see what happened, over 100 years ago. Chris Archer, a historian in Tauranga, has written a very good book about the whole campaign, and searched long and hard for material, and he says we're very fortunate to have such an array of material at our disposal. Okay, well, some of the material we've got is the likes of this letter, which I'll read a little bit. It's written on the 26th of December 1917, and it's addressed to his father. And it's, "Dear Father, enclosed you will find a telescope machine gun sight which was used against us on the 14th of November. Later in the day we captured the gun." And this is the actual machine gun sight. So we have the letters and we have the actual hard material that was actually off the battlefield. So to have all this material and to authenticate it is a real gem. And this is not the only bit. There's let's say there's many letters and there's quite a bit of material, so we can really trace this soldier's journey through World War One, through that campaign of probably 8 or 9 months, and it's a rich history that I think New Zealand should really be more aware of. Significant battles, and many soldiers fought and died there, and we need to remember our history. And it's important to Israel as well. They still remember this very well. They were liberated from the Ottoman Turks after 400 years of persecution, and they still remember the brave endeavours by the New Zealanders, and we are letting the side down by not really remembering or putting in place items to remember the soldiers by. The relationship between the New Zealanders and the Jews is very strong. It certainly was very, very strong then. After the liberation, the Jews had a different life, a new life, a free life, and they are totally grateful, eternally grateful for what the New Zealanders did, and see that they actually did a wonderful job. And while we were there, heard a number of times, you came the furthest, you did the most, you were the youngest nation helping the oldest nation. And it was pretty moving to hear that, and to know that my grandfather was part of that. And it hasn't been forgotten. Many of the old Jews and in the villages that are there have got history, are still very, very strong memories of what happened. And they see this as part of their history as well. Yeah, with Yossi and Michal, it was quite bizarre and amazing. How they were lost, travelling from Hamilton to Taronga, and ended up coming up our road. They were after a coffee and missed the calf completely, but they ended up outside our gate. And of course the gate has Sarona on it. He didn't come in straight away, came back 2 days later and wished to inquire as to the origin of the name Sarona. And he was here, and I was able to tell him that it was definitely related to World War I and my grandfather, his location in the Middle East. And he was very insistent that we come to Israel. And we did. We were invited and had an amazing 10 days. And we were able to really follow in detail my grandfather's footsteps. Because we have a field diary and we have all the names and places where he was, and Yossi took photographs of every page of the diary. So by the time we ended up in Israel, he had mapped out a very detailed track for us to follow of my grandfather, and it was very humbling to be able to do that, and very, very appreciative of that. So, and this is a stranger I'd never met before. To do the amount of work that he had done speaks volumes of what still exists as far as a friendship between New Zealand and Israel goes. The project, where it sits at the moment, we have been working on it for a couple of years. We've obviously had a few problems with, as the world has. And right now we have about half the funding that's needed to see it through. And we have a very good supportive team in Israel that's working just as hard to see this project through. And we believe it will be in place for unveiling, public unveiling next April, Anzac. And hopefully it's supported by a number of New Zealanders and a number of Israelis. I'm quite certain it will be. Every Anzac, we use the words, we must remember them. It has now been 100 years, and these 53 soldiers that gave their lives have been forgotten. And I think it's time we actually remember them. So that in itself is important, but it's also important for ongoing goodwill and relationship with the state of Israel. It's so important that we actually do something to remember these guys, and the silver fern behind me is so fitting. The silver fern is iconic New Zealand. It's recognised in New Zealand and overseas, and a silver fern like this placed on the battle site in Israel to remember what happened there 100 years ago is so fitting, and I think it's so important.